To better understand how the motion builder attaches the motion capture data to our character, it's called a process known as retargeting. And we'll go into more detail with that. When we first merge our character from Mixamo in, we began to characterize it by just dragging and dropping the characterize on it. Sometimes that's not always the case. It won't be that easy. Sometimes there's errors, and one of the errors that you may get is if you don't attach the character correctly, you'll get this character definition error. The characterization process could not be completed because some required nodes are missing. Basically, it couldn't read the name of the bone structures that we placed on it. So we have to go in and manually do that. We'll press OK. It gives us which nodes are missing, which is everything. And we'll close this. So now we want to redefine that character. So if we bring up that character that we try to bring in, we have that red X, meaning that nothing was established. So now we have to go in and define the bone structure of this character and interpret how our motion capture data will drive the movement of the bone structure. So we will turn off our model so we can see our bones. And a lot of times, sometimes the bone structure when brought in, you can actually see the bones themselves. Sometimes they're really small and tiny and you can't really get a good selection. Another way to select the bones is to go into your navigator or your outliner and to actually go in and select that bone itself. So now we're going to reestablish our connections and definitions from our bone structure of our character to the character controls definition area. So we want to first start with our hips, the center point. Our hips do the main movement of our scene. They drive the character's entire body animation. So if we'll click and drag and we'll see that our hips are selected, we'll select them in here. And we want to right click on the bone area and we want to assign the selected bone to that region. A good way to test whether or not the bones are working correctly, or if you have the right bones selected to define, our hips drive everything, so everything's parented to our hips. So if we were to rotate our character just based on that selection, everything should move with it. So that just gives us validation that we're defining the correct bone to our character. Control Z to go back to our T-pose. So now we want to click and drag and we'll the right upper leg, we will assign the bone structure, and Motion Builder's smart enough that they notice that the left leg is named very similar and it attaches the other side. It mirrors our selection and a definition. So we'll go in, we'll do the right leg with our foot, the next one, our foot, and then our, don't want to rotate that, right toe, base toe, drives the whole foot, back to full body view. So now we'll go up to our spine. We'll select that first bone off the hip that's known as spine. So that selection one. We actually have another spinal bone that we could attach. But I've run into a lot of times when doing this that there's just a little bit of interaction based on our markers in this character, so we will just create the spine itself that moves the entire upper body. So now we'll go to our right arm and we'll assign that bone, And then we'll go to the forearm. We'll assign that. And for the hand, make sure that we're selecting the right bone that controls the entire hand. That works good, so we will assign the selected bone. And then now to establish the neck bone that kind of doesn't read correctly, we'll skip that and we'll just have our head selected, and we will assign that. And once we assign that last bone, actually we'll go in and we'll give our right shoulders definition as well. So we'll assign selected bones there. So now we get our validation status on our character. It's correctly defined and we characterized it. So now we'll test it. And we'll merge in our mocap data that we have established. Merge it in. We'll bring up our import options. Make sure our take is imported in. And we'll merge it in. We'll also want to go back and we'll turn our model visibility back on. So now after we've retargeted our bones to our character control definitions, we want to now establish our character to be controlled, movements to be controlled from our mocap data. So we'll define our source as the skeleton 1, and it'll ask us to characterize. We'll click biped. Now that we see in the navigator window our character is active, we want to change the first time you establish the skeleton as the source and ask you the biped option, it's basically characterizing your character and activating it to be used. So you have to go in again and change the source to skeleton 1. So now we see that it's established. We'll turn off the visibility of our motion capture guy. And then we'll test it out. We have a correctly retargeted character with our defined bones and joints.